Alright, Trial Mob, looks like it just got 100% real. Joytoy just announced a Warhammer 40k collaboration in a 1/18th scale figure, which is literally a dream come true for me, but I proceeded to watch my wallet basically have a heart attack and ascend into heaven, so I guess it just got real for us all. Alright, Trial Mob, so after a almost 2-year hiatus, I'm finally back into the Joytoy realm by buying my first set. There's been a lot of changes since then, and obviously there's been some great stuff that has been put out by them before, but what about this one really pushed me into finally pulling the trigger on jumping back on the Joytoy wagon? Well, that's what this video is about. So today we have with us the Flying Heavy Cavalry Type A, and let me just go ahead and tell you, if you haven't had a chance to pick this up, this might be the one that gets you back into Joytoy. But let me go ahead and share with you why this, for me, brought me back into the fold, and why it might be the one that brings you back as well. All right, let's go ahead and get it. All right, you guys, so this episode is sponsored to you by Load Up Freight Management. We find the loads that pay what you want going where you want. Now listen, if you've been paying attention to the trucking industry, you'll know it's $1 billion industry. And currently right now, there's a really huge backup of work, which is the reason why we're not even seeing a lot of these guys in stores right now. So please link up with my guys at Load Up so that we can go ahead and start getting all this moving again. And we can go ahead and start finding some cool ass action figures on the streets again at our local Targets, Walmarts, and comic book shops. Load Up Freight Management. Go ahead and check in the description below for the website and link up with my guys. Alright, you guys, so Flying Heavy Cavalry Type A from the Joytoy line. They have done massive improvements in how they've done the packaging of their figures, and this is incredible. Now again, the last one I bought was 2 years ago, and the sheer difference of what we're getting here in terms of packaging is incredible. So as you can see, I've already removed, but this box actually comes sealed in plastic, so shrink wrapped in plastic, which is very, very nice. It gives it a very almost model kit-like feel to it, which I have absolutely no problem with. But let's go ahead and do the full 360 on the box art and show you. So on the front, we actually get a drawn figure. So it doesn't have any of the joints. This is like an actual, like if this were a graphic novel, this is what the figure would look like. And it looks phenomenal. It's a nice looking piece. It's got the shadow behind it. I think that they definitely put some thought into how they wanted this to look. And overall, it looks really nice. On the side, we do get the name itself, 10th Legion, Flying Heavy Cavalry Type A. It doesn't say Type A, it just has a big A, but I like the yellow. It is a good aesthetic. And then when we come around to the back, we do get the actual figure on the right in a nice looking pose, and then we get a lot of the just basically product information, warnings. It's made in China, 10th Legion on the top, Joytoy in the top right. You go ahead and pause this and take a look and read everything. It is really cool. It does have a little bio. Oh, it doesn't really have a bio, but it does give you stats on the figure, which is nice. And then we get a repeat of the other side, just saying the same thing. Again, I like this aesthetic. And then this is where they really blew me away. On the front cover, obviously, looks very nice. But guess what? Got some Velcro, as you can hear. And it opens up to show us the figure, and the figure looks phenomenal in there. This is great presentation. I'm not willing to say that this is better than Acid Rain, but it is something unique and different. And I really like this setup. I'm not saying I don't want Acid Rain to change the way they're doing their containers, right? It's something that makes it Acid Rain, but I can't help but love this presentation overall. The fact that I can just pop it open and see everything, this is really nice. And then on the inside of the other part, we do get the figure itself. Again, really nice high quality pose, and it looks well, it's done nicely, and it's really cool that we see that, right? I don't even have to pull him out in order to be able to get a look of what the actual figure will look like, and it is dope. They did a phenomenal job here. Again, kudos to Joytoy for completely massively upgrading their overall box presentation, and this right here makes it just an international level type of brand. This is no longer a small little brand that's coming up on the side of niche players. This right here has mass appeal and makes it feel like a legit collectible, which is something that I feel it was missing before when it came to its overall presentation. But guys, I think this is overall a good start to what's going to be a good figure. Alright, you guys, so flying heavy cavalry type A from Joytoy. Now listen, Joytoy has had the opportunity to have a lot of international success in the same way Acid Rain has, because they've been doing a lot of their own upgrades, especially having cool ass figures like the one we have in front of us. This is the first Joytoy, as I mentioned before, that I've bought in quite some time, and the reality is that it's a phenomenal piece, and I'm probably going to get the Type B version and any of the other ones that they may come out again in the future with that have this general motif, because I really like the heavy units, and the fact that it's a flying heavy unit is even better. So before we get into the whole 360 of the whole figure, let me go ahead and point out a couple of things. If this is your first time getting into Joytoy, they've done some massive upgrades in packaging, which I covered already, but more so the way that the figures come. So I normally don't do this immediately, but let me just go ahead and show you guys. So this is a release from Joytoy that I purchased probably about 2 years ago, and I was very turned off by this, not because it doesn't look good. As you can tell, it does look pretty badass, but here's the thing. The figures used to come in plastic boxes that were kind of like rectangles, and none of what you see here came the way it came. I had to literally add the shin armor, the thigh guards, the vest, both of the bicep and the forearm pieces, and then the helmet itself. So I'm gonna be honest with you, it was a total pain. I actually had to heat the stuff up just to get it to, oh, and the belt as well. It was quite a nightmare. You had to heat up the joints to be able to get off the hands and the legs, and I broke more than one piece, and luckily they do come with extra pieces for you to fix that, but it was just quite the problem. I couldn't just, you know, pull them out and start playing with them, or pull them out and video them. And in order to get this nice cool setup you see right here, you have to go through quite some stuff that it just didn't make sense that we had to do all that. So luckily Joytoy has upgraded their processes, and what you see here is exactly how it comes in the box. The only thing I had to change was the helmeted head, add both guns because obviously he's not wearing it, and then the flight suit in the back, or excuse me, his I guess jetpack, I don't really know what it is, but I had to add that in. So obviously they've made their figures a lot more accessible from the jump, and you don't need to do anything to get them how they look on the box itself or what you're expecting them to come as, which was one of my biggest detractors. As I mentioned, I did not like doing that, but most of their newest stuff already comes pre-assembled, and that is a godsend for these characters. It makes it a lot more, or at least for me, worth my money, that they already come like this from the jump. I don't like removing stuff. I'll have to show you guys. I think SkellyWags has a video out right now. I'll have to put it down in there in the description, but he likes taking everything apart. I personally don't like doing that because I like to keep the integrity of the character as strong as possible, and so the fact that they already come like this is wonderful. So let's go ahead and start off with the full 360. Let me go ahead and show you guys with everything on him. So I'm going to do a little zoom up from the top of the body, and then we'll work our way down, and I'll show you the unhelmeted head in a second. I think it's pretty good overall. So as you can tell, he does have the white helmeted head, but it has some grooves in it, a little bit of black on top, some red I guess divots on each side, and then we do get some grays in the front head, and go ahead and bring them a little closer. And then on the sides we do get really nice blues mixed in with some of the grays of what would be the mouthpiece. And again, it's got a beautiful shape to it. It looks really cool, almost Halo-esque, but maybe more realistic. And then we do have the silvers right here on the side of the head, where I imagine if this were fully articulated, I imagine this piece right here would lift up to show face under. Too bad we don't get it, but it is what it is. We do get like a red scarf neck piece right here, and it is removable. I'll show you guys later. And then we do get this blue armor throughout that does look really nice. The actual aesthetic of it is really nice. All the grooves. Paintwork is clean. It does have some dry brushing. I did notice that somebody mentioned they didn't necessarily like the blue paint job, and I'll admit I don't know how I feel about the dry brushing. It's not a bad effect, and the way it comes from the factory is perfectly fine. I'm wondering if it would have benefited more from just one solid colored paint job all the way through with some highlighting instead of some dry brushing. But for the most part, it does look good throughout. And then we have these mechanical pieces leading into the exoskeleton that are done very nicely. And actually the way that it's the architecture of it and the way it's done is actually pretty badass. I like this. It's very realistic to what I imagine it would look like in real life if they were going to do this in a real military setting, how they would set this up. So it connects into the chest and it does peg out. Let me go ahead and flip them to the side, and as you can tell, the armor itself does look really dope. It connects into a backpack in the back, and for this I'm actually going to remove the jetpack, and we'll go over that later. If I can just get this off on camera. Cool. So As you can tell, the colors look really nice throughout the exoskeleton. We get these grays, these reds, and more of a silver really, but mixed in with a little bit of darker grays throughout. So again, it gives us more of a three-dimensional feel to it. Of course, that's where the jetpack pegs in, even though he does have thrusters on it. So we don't get a lot of lore on these guys, so it's hard to tell you what any of this does, and we don't get an animation or none of that. So I couldn't tell you, but again, it just runs all the way through. Really nice colors all throughout. The whites that are scattered throughout the blue armor, beautiful breakup of paint. They chose the right place to put them in and to give it the most amount of texture all throughout. And I really like it. And of course you do see the black undersuit under that, and it does look, again, really nice. And luckily the joints are black just like the undersuit, so they hide themselves fairly well. And then you can see obviously where these pieces are kind of overlays, and they all do come off. Again, I'm just not going to do that, but that's just something to note. As we move down to the belt itself is also a floating piece. It's done very nicely. It's got some shading throughout it, so it's not just a gray piece. I like that. We do get the browns in some of the pouches, which again is really nice that they do come with pouches and things like that. And it's actually two color browns. I don't know if you can tell that. It's like a darker red brown in the front, and more of like a tan colored rhubarb color on the side pouches. They do have some black straps to it, which is very nice. The black jeans under it look good, and they do have pockets in the back because of course you need pockets. And then when we get down to the legs, it is a very nice look overall. Again, we see some of those whites, not perfectly done, but I'm not going to fault them as much as maybe I should. But as you can tell, there's divots, there's grooves, there's what looks like other thrusters, a different color, almost copper gray at the bottom. Then we have the white of the shins with some insignia of the, I'm sure, of the 10th Legion or something. And it does say 10 right there on the leg, which is really nice. If we come around, we do see his holster with his weapon. I'll go over that a little bit later. The grays again in the leg, and then again the black of the actual articulation goes perfectly fine with the black of the undersuit, so that's done very nicely. And then let me go ahead and zoom down a little bit more. So as we get into the legs, you'll be able to see the legs are done really nicely as well. Thrusters at the bottom. Again, this aesthetic is really nice, right? These guys are supposed to be basically flying through the air, or at least high mobility, right? So all these little thrusters that would probably help them, kind of like Iron Man, right, to stabilize themselves or potentially to move faster when on foot, is really nice. And again, a lot of grooves, a lot of paint work. I really like that. The white of the ankles, or should I say the ankle guards, again, great usage of where they're going to put the whites. And then the black on the back, as you can tell right there, a little bit of shading, and again a lot of that dry brushing all throughout, and then just a solid black foot piece. But I do like the way it looks. I think it's done very nicely, and again, these are some thick guys, and those feet look like they can actually hold them up, which sometimes we don't get figures that match the aesthetic in that sense. All right, when it does come to accessories, the heavy cavalry comes with a load of stuff. And then he does come obviously with his exoskeleton, which I do want to show you guys, but I'm not going to rip it off the body. I'm just going to show you guys with it still attached. So as far as I can tell, most of this is pretty brand new, for the exception of the heavy gun, which in fact we got at least a version of that, potentially that exact same version with this release right here, because it was about 5 of these guys and they all come with an extra weapon, one of them coming with one of those mini machine guns. But it is a really cool gun overall to still have, and I do believe it was painted a little differently, so we'll get into that in a second. So for starters, we do have this really nice jetpack, and it's done very well. It has the whites basically all the way through as the base coat, and then it is supposed to be, I shouldn't say battle damage, but the paint is battle damage, right? Because these guys are flying through the air, you know, getting into the thick of battle. They're the heavy guys, and so we do see basically missing paint all throughout, you know, where there would have been like scratches and things like that. The yellow at each end definitely makes it nice because it breaks up some of the white. On the bottom, it's a little bit more different. Some of that granulated look still. Some of those grooves that we see, that yellow in the middle is nice. The silver that goes around it, or should I say gray, is good. And the red at the tips of the thrusters, definitely a nice look to it. This almost looks like a Gundam piece. And then those 4 grooves that we see at the bottom, the red that we see on the thrusters, again, very nice. The red triangle, the 4 yellows, stripes, and then the silver pieces right here, or again, gray pieces right there. Very nice touch. And I will mention that, as you can tell, it's a fairly long piece. I have to hold it down here just to try to keep it all within the screen. Actually, let me see how tall he is. So he is headless, obviously, but it's almost the entire body itself. So really nicely spaced, or excuse me, nicely sized aerial wings. Now, one of the main reasons why I even bought this was for this gun right here. I think it's a dope looking piece overall. And as you can tell, again, that granulated look, kind of like Acid Rain. And so we've got black for the stock, black for the magazine, black for the actual barrel. But it looks nice, it looks futuristic. It does have that white granulated look, the reds throughout. And it's the same on the other side. Very nice looking, and it looks great when he's aiming down sight and shooting it. It's a really cool looking gun, and I do appreciate that kind of half futuristic, half still realistic look that they got going on here. The pistol is also nicely done, grays on the bottom, silvers in the middle, and again that same black gray that we have for the sights, and it looks nice. He holds it decently well. You're not going to get the actual finger through that hole right there, but he does hold it, and when he can't hold it in both hands, and it looks pretty good. He's kind of a thicky boy, so I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best for pistols, and I don't think Joytoy is the best when it comes to being able to hold a pistol. I think Acid Rain definitely does that way better, but that's because of the articulation, and we'll go into that a little bit later. And then we do get this knife right here, which is pretty fucking sick. I'm not even gonna lie. It basically has this hilt right here and this fist guard, so you can punch somebody in the face with it, and then this looks like a total gutting weapon. Yeah, it's pretty brutal, but I like that. I like how cool it looks. These guys are heavy, and they come meaning business, so it's pretty cool. The main difference between this minigun and the one I got before is that the one I got before was just all black. This one's done a bit nicer. Granted, it's not... look at that. I can't even push that together. So it's done very nicely for the most part. It's just basically a gray with a little bit of a wash all throughout, but it looks nice, and it is given red for the actual barrel where the bullets are coming out from, which again is nice because the one I got before was just all black, so this definitely looks a little bit more realistic. It has a little bit more detail to it, and I appreciate the way this looks in his hands a bit better than the other ones. Again, maybe because he's bigger and he's got the exoskeleton, and it makes sense that he'd be able to walk around with this kind of weapon. Now he does have 4 fists right here. Basically the 2 in front are fisted, the ones in the back are just basically for holding. Very basic. I'm not going to show you guys that up front, and I'll show you guys the hands he has during the articulation. Now his unhelmeted head does look pretty good for the most part. It does look fairly realistic. I wouldn't say it's the most realistic I've ever seen, but it is done pretty nicely, and again, probably when you have it on the body it looks nicer. And he does have these scratches all throughout his head, which are nice, but I almost can't help but feel that it almost looks like it's not supposed to be there. Maybe it is, but the mustache is done well. The scratches do make him look like a war veteran, and it is pretty badass because again, these guys are supposed to be in the thick of it, right? Heavy armor, and they're flight suited, so pretty badass overall. But I like the head overall, but I'm going to obviously have my guy with the helmet on. And then as I mentioned earlier, you guys are now seeing the helmet up close now, and as you can tell, it does look really nice all the way through. Paint is done fairly well. Not perfect, as you can tell, like on the back right there. But the shape itself is really nice. It does look like something that somebody who is flying through the air would wear, almost like a hawk. Now that I look at it, look at that. Doesn't that look like a hawk? That's the beak right there, the eyes, right? But again, it's an overall really dope looking helmet, and I really like this aesthetic. I really hope they bring out a few more things just like this. Not the light flying cavalry, I think those look okay, but this style is really nice. Now to take a quick look at the exoskeleton, as you can tell, it does hook up right here around the wrists, and then it does come up to a joint right there at the, we would say the elbow, and then it comes up to this kind of bar right here. You guys can see right there that basically connects from 4 different places. So right here to swivel, and then right here to connect to the backpack, right in the front that connects to the chest, and then this piece that swings back to around the back of the backpack, all articulated from each and every single point that you see. You can move it around, and again, that gives it all the articulation it needs. But again, very realistic. I imagine if there was an exoskeleton that was going to be used, this is really how it would be used overall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legs, we could say, that are disconnectable. This is probably also disconnectable, but I'm not going to even try because I'm not about to break this. These no longer come with extra joint pieces, so I couldn't tell you where to find basically replacement parts if anything were to break, so just be mindful. But overall, the aesthetic is really nice. The grays, the silvers, the red throughout to show, I don't know what those reds would be for, but you know, lines that, you know, help the thrusters cool maybe, but it looks really good. And when you just have him there just standing, he looks very imposing, and I'm really happy with how this came out with the skeletal structure. Some of the ones they've done before haven't been all that good, but having this extra armor to connect everything to, I think really helps the aesthetic of the figure. All right, so when it comes to articulation, I'm going to say that I think Acid Rain has them a little beat, but for the most part, I think this is still going to hit most of the beats you want with this figure. So let's go ahead and start with the head. The head itself can look up about that far and about that far down, so it doesn't really look down much. And to be honest, this head comes off kind of easy, and even if you take off the neck scarf, that doesn't really seem to get in the way much. But it can turn side to side. As you can tell, you can get a full 360 out of it, which is really good. I can't really fault it for that, and it is a heavy armor, so there is going to be certain caveats. Now the body does bend forward about that much, and then backwards about that much, so you definitely get some personality out of this one, even with the heavy armor. I'm sure if you shimmy things around, you might be able to get a little extra, but on average, that's about how much you can get. And as you can tell, these guys do have a natural and wonderful at attention pose. These guys look very, very military. I love when I can put up a figure and have them stand literally straight up. It's a very good look overall. Now, even with the exoskeleton on, as you can tell, you can basically get him all the way up to a T-pose. He's just shy. You know what? I'm not even going to say just shy. I think for what it is, that's a full T-pose. So even with all the exoskeleton, as you can tell, the range is phenomenal. In this sense, obviously, Acid Rain cannot pull a T-pose because of the way the joint is, so I have to give it to Joytoy here. This is beautiful that you can get this guy this far, especially since he's a flying character. Now, without the armor, you do get a full 360, but with the exoskeleton on, you can go up about that far forward and about the same backwards before the actual armor, the exoskeleton itself, stops it from going any further. Now there does seem to be a butterfly joint in there because you can see it kind of moving back and forward. And then you do have a little bit of a bicep, but I'm not really going to get in there to try to mess with it. Because actually, now that I think about it, I don't think it has an upper bicep swivel, which is fine because it does have this elbow joint that does come noticeably past 90 degrees, which is really nice, even considering all the armor. You know, it does get up a little bit past, I'd say that's noticeably past 90 degrees, and it does swivel out. And again, you can get it literally out to the side, even with the armor on. That's phenomenal. And then you can only get it to go back basically to a straight pose, as you can tell right there. The wrist itself does do a full 360 all the way around, and then it is on a hinge joint, so it does go up and down. And I think that this is probably the best of both worlds. You're able to twist it all the way around, and then you're able to hinge it up and down. So you get that cowboy and that push-up basically ability that with the Acid Rain guys you don't always get. Now the other arm is identical in every way, so there's no changes there. And then for the waist, you do get a swivel going left and right, and I'm pretty sure you can get it all the way around, but there's just too much in the way here to really do that. You can, I mean, there you go. You can see how far I got him. You can basically go anatomically correct in either direction, or if you want to break his back, you can and get him all the way around, which is nice. Now at the legs, he can do the splits, and he does go about that far, which is, I think, far enough for being a heavy armored guy. And then you do get some upper thigh swivel, as you can tell right there. Does do probably a full 360 without the armor. And then he does kick forward. I'm going to call that about 90 degrees. Maybe, you know, 85 degrees. But again, for a fully armored guy, you can get him to do the Sparta kick as long as you lean him back a little bit more. He goes even higher. So, you know, with a little bit of finessing, you can get past 90 degrees. And to me, that is phenomenal. And then you do get the double joints at the knees. And this actually does what I've been saying that the Black Series stuff needs to do. They need to make the knee pad like the center of the joint, so that when I do this style of posing, yeah, it's not perfect, but I think that looks a lot better than if the knee pad were sticking out from the bottom of the joint or from the top of the joint. I think right down the middle is going to look the nicest in most photography. And then when we get down to the ankles, we do get some ankle pivot, not the most, but enough to show some personality. The other direction, again, enough to do something about it. And then he does point down about that far. He does come up about that far. And then the foot itself, holy crap, mine is super tight. I'm not going to finesse it, but it does have that toe pivot, which is nice as well. So as you can tell, Joytoy has just really upgraded their stuff, and it has been a godsend the fact that they have decided to make their stuff pre-assembled, because It wasn't until recent memory that I saw something that I liked and just decided to look at an unboxing video and realized that everything came pre-assembled, and that is exactly what Joytoy needed to be able to get some of this international success, because a lot of people at this scale don't want to be dealing with that kind of stuff on these smaller figures that are maybe more sensitive to breaking, which is something that I experienced. So it's nice that everything comes pre-assembled. You don't necessarily have to put anything together. Everything comes the way it should from the packaging, and there's no chances of, you know, pre-wear and tear that you might not have gotten if it would have just came already looking like this. You know, for the longest time, I wasn't a believer that anything below 6 inches could look good in terms of like military figures. And while Acid Rain is cool, it still has more of that, you know, graphically kind of animated look to it. And Joytoy does benefit from being more realistic looking overall, with the body shape, with the way everything looks. And this has been the proof that basically you can get something of a smaller scale and get the same amount of general quality and just badassness and overall really articulation that you could in like a 6-inch figure or even larger. And so kudos to Joytoy for bringing forth something as cool as this, and their new kind of like Star Warsy, futuristic-y, you know, sci-fi figures that they've been coming out with lately have been phenomenal. So it's obvious that Joytoy is experiencing some of the same success that Acid Rain is having, thanks to them making differences like this, where their figures are coming pre-packaged, they look really nice, they have this aesthetic to it that I think is appealing to a lot of sci-fi fans like myself. And even with some of their like World War II stuff that they come out with, it's been a really nice change in recent memory, and I think that they're going to have the same widespread appeal of other larger figures, right? The 6-inch scale like Marvel Legends and stuff. It's just a matter of time before we start seeing this at your local toy store, your local toy shop, because they're just getting better and better, and the appeal is just getting wider and wider, and I'm very happy to be a part of it right now. Again, I didn't realize that a lot of this stuff was coming pre-packaged, but now that it is, and that I can, you know, figure that out which ones do, I would love to buy some more Joytoy stuff. And again, if they come out with more reinforcements for these kinds of figures, I'm buying. And of course, what is a review without some size comparisons? And I don't have any other Joytoy, for the exception of the one that I already showed you, so I'll start with that, and then I'll show you guys some Acid Rain stuff for comparison. So as you can tell, they are fairly close in size, even helmeted, but the Heavy Cavalry is just the slightest bit thicker. So obviously what you're going to notice here is that the Heavy Cavalry is the slightest bit taller and the slightest bit thicker even without the armor. As you can tell, he's got much larger feet, which is why I mentioned earlier the size of the feet really matter here in terms of stability for how large the character is and how much more he weighs. So for the most part, that is a nice caveat. And as you can tell, the hips are a little bit different. This Joytoy one seems to have a wider hips, and this seems to come into a point. I kind of like this better. I kind of like this stance a little better, but as you can tell, it's not necessarily as realistic looking as on the Heavy Cavalry, but they size it very nicely, and you can tell that they are from the same, you know, brand, same maker. You know, in a diorama together, this would make a lot of sense, fighting against each other in your photos. Now, as I mentioned, I don't have much Joytoy to show you guys for comparison, but I have plenty of Acid Rain, and I'm just going to tell you guys right now, it feels pretty weird. I shouldn't say weird. It just feels incredibly different having a Joytoy in your hand compared to an Acid Rain. They are definitely different types of figures, and here we have the Kelsey, and as you can tell, she is a female character. She is going to be a bit smaller, but look how large her arms are. They're like the same size as the other guy. If anything, Kelsey's might just be the slightest bit longer than the Heavy Cavalry. So again, this leads to the more animated look that we get out of the Acid Rain stuff compared to the more realistic look of the Joytoy. This, again, sizing wise is perfect, so this could definitely be in the same universe, but in terms of the overall aesthetic and the proportions, they definitely look like they're from different manufacturers, but that's perfectly fine. That's how it should be anyway. You're getting a different taste, and you can buy what you like, the more realistic Joytoy stuff or the more animated looking and animated proportions of the Acid Rain stuff, so that's up to you. But I really like this sizing overall. She is smaller in most dimensions, and again, in photography, you won't be able to notice the difference. Alright, and here we have the Osprey Commando next to him, and he is slightly shorter as he should be, but the proportions here are crazy, man. Look at the Osprey Commando's arm compared to the Heavy Cavalry. Oh my god, he has like gorilla arms. They're so long, and it just looks more unproportioned the more I look at it next to the Acid Rain guy. But at the same time, maybe the Acid Rain one looks a little short in comparison, I don't know, but it is definitely a whole half hand, if not more, longer on the Osprey Commando. So again, when it comes to overall aesthetics and just proportions, Acid Rain is just incredibly different, but I like the way it looks regardless, and you're buying what you want for your preference. And again, in photography, you're not gonna be able to notice. It's gonna look great either way. And I like this sizing overall. Again, they're both 1/18 scale, and it shows. Now, obviously, Acid Rain does have its own exoskeleton units, and this was one of the very first ones that we got. And I will admit that I like Joytoys a lot more, to be honest. Not some of their older stuff, because their older stuff is just as wonky as this. But this specific design choice that they've decided to go with here, I think works magnificent. This is way more easier to use than, as you can tell, the Acid Rain stuff is a little bit more wonky. It doesn't hold together as well. You have to play around with it more. And he can't necessarily stand all that well. I'm actually surprised how easily I was able to get the Civic Company guy to stand. But I think aesthetically speaking, it's a really cool design, and that's what I really like about it. And you can still get the Acid Rain Civic Company guy into any kind of pose that you want. It's not a problem. And if anything, he has more posability probably in the legs than the Joytoy Heavy Cavalry, but sizing wise they do look pretty good. Again, the proportions are different, and I do overall love this Acid Rain stuff. So the Civic Company stuff is definitely some of my favorite stuff so far, but as I mentioned, I really like the setup that they decided to go with this Heavy Cavalry Joytoy. I mean, yeah, it would have been nice to have gotten some of that exoskeleton stuff around the legs, but I think the way that they've decided to engineer at least that top half is, I think, a lot more superior than what we're getting over here on the Civic Company side. But I love them both, and I would buy them both, and I would army build them both, and I actually already have 2 of these guys, and I still need to get at least 1 more of the Type B or maybe the Type A again with that gentleman. Now here we have the Camelbot, and as you can tell, he dwarfs him. And to be honest, the more I look at the proportions of these kinds of figures, the more funny it looks next to the Joytoy stuff, because look how long that arm is. God damn, that's huge. This dude is gigantic compared to the Acid Rain stuff, and he'd look even smaller next to the Laurel that I have, the Revenant Laurel. So this is honestly a really nice piece overall together, and it just looks funny. But I think I would love to see a diorama of these two fighting, or, you know, photography of him fighting against these robots, because it's okay for these robots to have these longer limbs and stuff. They don't look so animated in that sense, but it does look obviously Acid Rain. And again, on the left we definitely have some Joytoy. And then finally here we have him next to a Reborn Trooper, and again, very large character, but this is a little bit more manageable in between both of them. And again, the Reborn guys, I believe, are supposed to have like cybernetic enhancements. They're missing limbs, so they got robot arms and stuff like that. So again, this might be a way to compartmentalize the difference in the scaling of the arms and legs. But again, on the right you have something that's very much so Acid Rain, on the left one is very much so Joytoy, but it still looks good. In the diorama you will be able to get perfect photos out of them. Alright guys, so for me, this Joytoy Heavy Cavalry has been able to lift the drought that was about 2 years of me not buying Joytoy stuff. But honestly, look at this figure. It's really dope. It's a really badass figure overall. It already comes pre-assembled. All you have to do is add a few of the options, right? The guns, the helmet, the jetpack on the back, which you can obviously pose without it. Alright, so overall this figure is quite phenomenal, and as you'll be able to notice, it has such a variety to it. You can pose him with different weapons, you can pose him with or without his helmet, you can basically put the exoskeleton on or off, and that includes also the jetpack that comes on him. So he just has a wide variety of different looks that you could give him. So that means that if you did buy more than one, you could give them different looks, you could swap out different heads. It's a really nice figure overall. When it comes to Joytoy, this is definitely one of the best figures of the line that they've ever had, and one of the things that they need to do is continue bringing out figures that are already pre-built, that have this variety to them. And if you haven't already had an opportunity to, make sure you go out and buy, you know, this figure. It is located at Big Bad Toy Store. You can get it at AliExpress. I believe Pia Club might have it, but I could be incorrect. But make sure that you guys get this one. This is definitely one of the figures that you guys need to go out and buy immediately. Do not pass this one up. Out of all the ones I've gotten before, for me, this is what hits the sweet spot in terms of the exoskeleton, the heavy armor, the equipment that he comes with. And I think that you guys are going to be remiss if you guys do miss the opportunity to buy this guy while he is still available widely. So if you guys did like this video, please give me a like, comment, subscribe. I will be bringing more Joytoy stuff to you guys as I'm able to get them in hand. This has been my first Joytoy review that I've ever done, and I'm hoping I will be able to bring more to you guys, but again, that'll be up to the release schedule of how Joytoy gets them out, and of course how quickly I can get them in hand, since I am buying a lot of this overseas, though this one I was able to get here in the United States. So we'll go ahead and see if I can get more as I'm able to buy more. This one was specifically off eBay, but right now that I am doing this new Joytoy stuff, if there is something else that you want to see, if you guys have any recommendations of what I should try to purchase, or if there's other things you want me to touch base on that maybe I missed here, let me know. Again, I'm still refining my entire process, and while I am getting pretty close to what I think is fairly perfect for what I wanted to put out for you guys, there's still always room for improvement, and any feedback that you guys give me is great. Or even if you want to comment on how dope this figure is. Again, this is one of my favorite pieces that I've gotten so far, and this has reinvigorated my want to get more Joytoy stuff as they release. And if they're able to follow this general aesthetic, I'm sold. So definitely take a look at it. And if you want me to do more Joytoy and Acid Rain comparisons, let me know. I can do that stuff too. But as I mentioned before, like, comment, subscribe so you guys can keep up with all the content that I'll be putting out on this 1/18 scale model lines. All right, this was a TBG feature. I was your host, Nello. I'll see y'all in the next one. Deuces.